You hear it all the time. America is energy independent. We produce more oil than ever. Great. So why do we still import millions of barrels of crude every single day? Why is some of our own oil literally more valuable overseas than in our own backyard? That's what we're unpacking today. And spoiler alert, the story is way messier and more bizarre than you probably expect. Later, I'll show you one law you've never heard of that makes it cheaper to ship oil from Saudi Arabia to New York than from Texas to New York. Yes, really. Let's jump into the second best reason first. Chapter 1, Oil Type Mismatch, Light versus Heavy. Most Americans assume all oil is the same. It's not. Common belief. We produce enough oil, so we must be using it. Contrarian flip. We do produce a ton of oil. It's just the wrong kind for many US refineries. Here's the deal. US shale fields, Permian Basin, Bakken, etc. produce mostly light, sweet crude, high quality, low sulfur, easier to refine into gasoline. Sounds great, right? But many of our refineries, especially older ones built in the 70s, 80s, were configured for heavy, sour crude. That kind comes from abroad, Venezuela, Mexico, etc. They handle more sulfur, more density. They're built to do that heavy lifting. So what happens? We export a lot of our light crude because buyers overseas will pay good money for it, but we import heavy crude that matches what our refineries expect. Crazy, right? Upgrading a refinery to process a different type of crude isn't just flipping a switch. We're talking hundreds of millions, sometimes billions, of dollars in capital, permits, and environmental checks. That mismatch alone means a huge chunk of domestically produced oil might not be worth the cost to refine here. Chapter 2, Infrastructure and Logistics, Why Moving Oil is Harder Than It Sounds. Here's part 2 of the puzzle. Geography, pipelines, shipping laws, and logistics make using our own oil less trivial. Take where much of the oil is produced, the Permian Basin in Texas and New Mexico inland. But many of the refineries are located near coastlines or built around older supply lines. Transporting oil across states through aging or limited pipelines, trucking, or rail can cost more than simply importing crude via ship to a port. In some cases, it's faster, easier, or cheaper to bring in foreign crude than haul it across half the US. One law adds flavor to this absurdity, the Jones Act. It mandates that goods moved between US ports must be shipped on US-built, US-owned, and US-crewed vessels. Those ships are far more expensive to operate than foreign tankers. That makes domestic coastal shipping even of oil disproportionately costly. As a result, certain coastal refineries end up relying on imported crude instead of domestic oil simply because of shipping inefficiencies, even though US oil may be physically closer. Also, some pipeline projects have been blocked politically or delayed indefinitely. No new pipeline means no cheap route. Keystone 40, local permit battles, environmental opposition, all of it plays a role. Finally, many refineries are already operating near capacity. Building new pipelines or refineries is enormously costly and politically toxic. Chapter 3, Economic Incentives and Global Trade. Okay, infrastructure woes aside, let's get down to money. Because at the end of the day, economics often overrides patriotism. Oil is a global commodity. Buyers, refiners, pay for what they need: type, quality, price. If you can sell your light crude overseas for a premium, you might choose export over domestic refining. Consider that exporting light crude to countries with refineries tuned for it may yield better profit margins than selling it to refineries that would have to modify equipment or pay extra to handle it. At the same time, US refineries may import heavier crude at a lower delivered price even with shipping and import fees than spending money to retrofit or expand capacity to process domestic oil. That creates a weird equilibrium. Export what you can sell abroad, import what works better locally. Also, regulatory and permitting uncertainty increases the risk of investment in new or adapted infrastructure. Investors weigh long timelines, lawsuits, environmental reviews versus stable international buyers ready to take the oil now. Another piece, politics and diplomacy. Importing oil from certain countries or maintaining trade ties via energy can be part of broader geopolitical strategy. Exporting heavily to others builds leverage. Chapter 4, Regulation, Environment and Permitting Barriers. Even if economics lined up perfectly, another layer of friction slows or halts action. Regulation. Permitting for refineries is expensive and time-consuming. Upgrading or adjusting feedstock means obtaining environmental reviews, emissions permits, and state and federal approvals. Local opposition, not in my backyard, can kill or delay expansion. Plus, over the past decades there's been growing political pressure to limit fossil fuel expansion entirely. Pipelines are blocked for climate concerns, moratoria on oil infrastructure appear, stricter emissions rules pile on, and corporations grow risk-averse. Even though the US is a top oil producer, public sentiment and federal regulation mean that building new refineries or upgrading old ones is not straightforward. Add to that tax policy, federal versus state jurisdiction, and uncertain long-term regulations like carbon pricing, it all makes infrastructure investment risky. Chapter 5. What it means for energy independence and you. So what's the bottom line? America isn't oil poor. We're oil rich. But that doesn't equal oil-usable at home without headaches. We might think we're energy independent. But because of all these mismatches, type of oil, infrastructure, regulation, cost, we remain interdependent. We export and import simultaneously. For consumers, that means gas prices, supply shocks, and policy debates aren't just about drilling more wells, they're about where and how we move that oil, which oil we use, and whether it's financially viable to change any of that. Attempts to become more independent by building more pipelines, upgrading refineries, or changing shipping laws run headfirst into political fights over environment, local impact, and climate goals. Still, some changes are possible. Targeted refinery upgrades, smarter pipelines, reforming shipping rules, or trade policy shifts. But every option has trade-offs, cost, delay, and backlash. So there you have it. America drills millions of barrels of oil daily. We're one of the world's largest producers. Yet in many cases, that oil doesn't power our own cars, run our own refineries, or heat our own homes. The reason isn't some grand conspiracy. It's not just politics. It's a tangled web of infrastructure lethargy, economic incentives, regulatory friction, and global trade logic. If you liked watching me unravel this paradox, you'll probably want to see my deep dive on which US pipelines should be built or stopped next. I'll link that next up. Hit that subscribe button. Leave me a comment. What surprised you most about this oil paradox? I'm glad you stuck around. Hope you feel smarter now. I'll see you next time on Unpacking America.